And fellowship alone might keep us dry for a period of time, but it will not bring about recovery. That will come about through the program itself. Now, Bill spends half of this chapter explaining why that's true. He spends the first half of the chapter showing people like us why the fellowship alone is not enough. He starts out over on page 20 talking about 3 different kinds of drinkers. He's going to talk about a social drinker, he's going to talk about a heavy drinker, and he's going to talk about a real alcoholic. On page 20, in the middle of the page, he said, how many times people have said to us, I can take it or leave it alone, why can't he? Why don't you drink it like a gentleman or quit? That fella can't handle his liquor. Why don't you try beer and wine, lay off the hard stuff? His willpower must be weak. He could stop if he wanted to. She's such a sweet girl, I should think he'd stop for her sake. The doctor told him that if he ever drank again it would kill him, but there he is, all lit up again. Now these are commonplace observations on drinkers which we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. Now he's going to show us 2 drinkers that those expressions would refer to. Moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely. If they got good reason for it, they can take it or leave it alone. We talked about those people last night. Slightly tipsy, out of control, nauseous feeling. Alcohol's no big deal for them. If any reason should present itself for them to stop drinking, they just stop drinking. They can take it or leave it alone. It's no big deal for them at all. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit bad enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult and troublesome and may even need medical attention. There's a type of drinker who drinks like an alcoholic. But if a good enough reason presents itself, they can do one of 2 things, either stop entirely or learn to moderate their drinking. They are not alcoholic, although they drink like alcoholics. And you and I see them all the time. They're the ones that say, when I was in the service, I was an alcoholic. But when I got out, I got married and I quit drinking, and I don't see why in the hell you can't quit drinking. They're not alcoholic at all. They just drink like alcoholics do. So those expressions would refer to them. But what about the real alcoholic? Now, he may start off as a moderate drinker. Many of us did. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker. Many of us were periodics. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. Now here's the fellow who's been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. He's a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He's always more or less insanely drunk. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature but little. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world. Yet let him drink for a day and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. He has a positive genius for getting tired at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. He's often perfectly sensible and well-balanced concerning everything except liquor, but in that respect he's incredibly dishonest and selfish. He often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes, has a promising career ahead of him. He uses his gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself, and then pulls the structure down on his head by a senseless series of sprees. He's the fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated he ought to sleep the clock around. Yet early next morning he searches madly for the bottle he misplaced the night before. If he can afford it, he may have liquor concealed all over his house to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him to throw down the waste pipe. As matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedative and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can go to work. Then comes the day when he simply cannot make it and gets drunk all over again. Perhaps he goes to a doctor who gives him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off. Then he begins to appear at hospitals and treatment centers. Sanitariums, I'm sorry. Same deal, just a new name for them today. Now, thank God, if our government has ever spent any money correctly, I think it's probably been through the education of the public on what alcoholism is. And thank God many of us are getting to AA before we have to do and be all these things here he's described. But I'll guarantee you, if you're a real alcoholic, you found yourself in there somewhere. At least one of those is going to fit every one of us. One that fits me perfect. He could afford it. He may have liquor concealed all over his house to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him and throw down the waste pipe. When I sobered up, I had a 45,000 broiler chicken operation on a 40-acre farm. 5 years after I sobered up, I sold that farm. Now, that's been 15 years ago. And today, every once in a while, I'll see the guy that bought it, and sometimes he'll wave and he'll say, "Hey, Charlie, we found another one." And he's referring to partially empty vodka bottles. They're all over that place, behind fence posts, in hollow trees, under rocks, feed bins, and God only knows where. Middle of the page, page 22. Why does he behave like this? If hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink means another debacle with all its attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it that he takes that one drink? Why can't he stay on the water wagon? You know, the other two drinkers can. Why can't the alcoholic stay on the water wagon? What has become of the common sense and willpower that he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters? Perhaps there never will be a full answer to these questions. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. We're not sure why, once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. We cannot answer the riddle. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We're equally positive that once he takes any alcohol whatever into his system, something happens, both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. Now, these observations, the ones I just read, would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. For the first time, they're really beginning to tell me where the difficulty lies. You know, in order for me to get drunk, I've got to drink. And in order for me to drink, my mind's got to tell me to drink. All action is born in thought. Now, I know that sometimes we react to things so automatically, we think we do it without thinking, but we don't. My body cannot function without my mind telling it what to do. Now, if I don't take the first drink, there's no way I can get drunk. And the only way I can take the first drink is for my mind to tell me that it's okay to take that first drink. All the stuff that happens when I'm drinking is beside the point if I don't take that first drink. Therefore, my real problem centers in my mind rather than my body. If you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he'll offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes the excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of the man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he can't feel the ache. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he'll laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. Once in a while, he may tell the truth. You know, strange as it may seem. Once in a great while, we alcoholics do tell the truth. Not too often, but sometimes. I had a lady in Al-Anon ask me about her husband. He's still drinking. She said, "Charlie, all he does is lie, lie, lie." She said, "How can you tell when one of you guys are lying?" I said, "Lady, you watch him closely. And if you see his lips moving, he's probably lying to you, okay?" I said, "Would you like for me to tell you how to keep him from lying?" And she said, "Oh, yeah. And I said, "Don't ask him those stupid questions." Don't ask him where he was last night. Hell, he don't know, and if he does, he can't tell you. There's no way. The truth, strange to say, is usually he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have. Some drinkers have excuses which are satisfied part of the time, but in their hearts they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. There is the obsession that somehow, someday, they will beat the game, but they often suspect they are down for the count. The great obsession of every alcoholic is someday, somehow, we're going to find a way to drink without getting drunk. Someday, somehow, we'll find the right stuff to drink. Someday, somehow, we'll find the right crowd to drink with. Someday, somehow, we'll find that location where we can drink and not get drunk. Now, that's a lie. And the obsession is so strong that it makes us believe something that is not true. It makes us believe we can drink. And based on believing we can drink, we take a drink. Then the allergy takes over, the craving is developed, and then we can't stop. But the real problem centers in the mind rather than the body. Page 24, squiggly writing. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. The almost certain consequences that follow taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If these thoughts occur, they are hazy and readily supplanted with the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. There is a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. You know, if you've burned your hand on a stove, chances are you're not going to go back and put your hand on there again to see if it'll burn you a second time. You know, that's a normal defense mechanism. And the alcoholic, we seem to not have that defense mechanism when it comes to alcohol. Now, I remember as a kid growing up, back during the Depression years, there's a few of you in here old enough to remember that, when we didn't have such things as hot and cold running water, forced air heat, and etc., the heat we had in our homes would be wood, coal, or whatever you could get. Joe said in his area they used to burn walnuts in the wintertime for heat. Now, every Saturday night, winter or summer, every kid in the family had to have a bath. Now, whether you needed it or not is absolutely beside the point. You're still going to have one on Saturday night. And Mother used to always, in the wintertime, heat the water up on the old heating stove in the living room, the cook stove in the kitchen. And she had a wash tub, I'll never forget. It's a number 3 zinc wash tub. She puts it behind the stove in the living room, puts the water in it, then we take our bath there where it's warm. Oldest kid take their bath first. Now, I'm the baby of the family. By the time it got to me, the old gray crud would be about a 1/4 inch thick. I'll never forget it. And one night in the middle of the winter, I'm in that tub taking a bath, cold outside, heating stove red hot, and I leaned over and stuck my rear against that stove. And it burned a blister on my rear end about as big as my hand. I'd never had anything hurt me like that before, nor have I since. And you know, I have never had an obsession of the mind to stick my ass on a hot stove since then. I can just see me today run up to one of those stoves, pull my britches down, and back up a hell no. Now, alcohol has burned me over and over and over and over, just as bad as that stove ever burned me, maybe a hell of a lot worse. And I can't remember that. My mind refuses to look a drunk all the way through. It can only see the sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by the first couple of drinks, like Dr. Silkworth said. If we could see the hospital, the jailhouse, the divorce court at the end of a drunk, we never would take a drink. But just before we drink, we can't see those things. There is a complete failure of the normal kind of defense that keeps you from getting hurt when it comes to alcohol. We are without defense against the first drink. Last paragraph, page 24. When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he's probably placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up may die or go permanently insane. Now, if we've placed ourselves beyond human aid, then the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous will not bring about recovery, because it's made up of a bunch of people who are just as powerless as we are. Human power will not solve this problem.